Hello and welcome to the 2021 Berkeley Institute for Arts Education and Special Needs Digital Learning Series. This monthly series, which consists of 12 webinars and workshops with hands-on teaching strategies, begins with today's presentation by Adam Goldberg and Pete Sparks, and will continue in June with a presentation on dance by Antoine Hunter. The June date is yet to be announced, so watch your email for more information. We are so excited to have you all here with us today. And without further ado, I'd like to hand it over to Adam and Pete.
All right, great. Thank you so much, Oriana. Yeah, and it's always great. I'm so glad to be part of this series and so many of the other things that Berkeley is doing for education. And it's really an honor to share and to work with Pete, and of course to share with you all. So I have had wonderful successes and experiences with my students using technology, but specifically the iPads. And of course, today we're focusing on GarageBand. So GarageBand has always been a big part of that. There are other apps that we'll probably mention. We actually did produce a handout. So there's a handout with a few other apps. Most of them are very low cost or free, the ones on the handout. So feel free to check those out. But you know, from the first day that I started using iPads with the students, it just changed everything for me and the way I approach my students and their music making, allowing them to really have a voice, because I see that now they're freed from so many of the kind of typical constraints that you might come across in teaching traditional instruments to students. And yet the iPad is a really truly viable musical instrument, and there are so many apps that are truly professional quality. That was always my direction with the students, despite their limitations. And it was finally with the iPads that I was able to start to really get to that place. And my students have performed at the National DOE in Washington, D.C. They've performed at many educational conferences. They 2 years in a row, back to back, they wrote compositions that were accepted to be performed at Carnegie Hall. And the second year, they actually performed their own song themselves at Carnegie Hall. So, but despite those wonderful results, the real wonder and joy is in the everyday work that I see with my students, and how they really enjoy the music making and how truly musical many of them are. They have so much to say. So that's kind of where I'm coming from. I've been teaching about 27 years. So again, in the last 10 years or so, that's really when things really changed in a wonderful way for me because of the technology, specifically iPads. So, Pete.
Thanks, Adam. Yeah, so brief introduction for myself as well. I'm Pete Sparks, and for about 15, probably actually 16, 17 years now, I've been working with a charity in Scotland called Drake Music Scotland. And the mission of the organisation is to open up music to a much wider range of people using music technology and using other kind of innovative ways of introducing and learning music. We have used things like sound beams and switches and all kinds of quite exciting technology that's often quite complex to learn and requires quite a lot of specialist knowledge from the people using it. Always our sort of goal is to enable people to experience control of musical sounds, and for people with physical disabilities, often technology can allow you to adapt the way that movement happens. So when iPads came along, we started exploring how they could work, and the fantastic blank kind of slate that this represents is such a high strength for us, because if somebody can only move a small amount, you can adjust things to capture their best movement, to capture their movement that gives them that sense of control and expression. So that's kind of the most important thing for us. As Adam said as well, the quality of the sounds that are available is tremendous. And GarageBand was what we chose for this because it's free. So everybody with an iPad should have access to GarageBand. And just to share with you, I wanted to share a picture. We do workshops all over Scotland and have worked in all age groups. So we do about 50 to 60 school projects every year, but we also work with young adults and older adults creating bands and things. And we have regular rehearsals and regular performance opportunities. And I just wanted to share with you a picture from 2018, where we went to, is that sharing my screen? No, there we go. This is from Singapore, 2018. So we went to be part of the True Colours Festival, and I took members of our digital orchestra, which is a group of digital musicians using iPads, laptops, digital drums and keyboards. And this shot to me just after we've performed, and this is Andrew, who's using the Thumb Jam app, and it just expresses for me the kind of the joy and the triumph for him, having kind of done a really difficult thing, traveling halfway across the world and to a new place, rehearsing in a massive stadium, and there were about 3,000 people in the audience every single night, and we did 3 nights. So it was an extraordinary experience. But those little iPads and those fairly cheap apps completely stood up to the task. So a massive stadium can still sort of work as well as a small classroom. So I think that's one thing we want to get the point across, is that a lot of you will be working in small situations with people, and you're building something, but actually it's really exciting to think of performance opportunities as well. I think that's about all I wanted to say about myself. Please visit website. We'll put our links up to websites and things, and you can go and check out stuff if you want later on. Thank you.
Thanks, Pete. Yeah, I really love that picture. It's incredible. Very powerful. So I wanted to set up some ground rules, although I'm really grateful. I see that the main thing I wanted to say, you guys are already doing it. You guys have all been on a lot of Zoom meetings, I guess. So you're all on mute. And we're going to pretty much ask you to stay muted. Of course, though, please feel free to use the chat for any questions or even whatever comments you may have. That's just fine. Pete and I will be monitoring the chat. We're going to ask, I'm sure you all have, actually, hopefully raise your hand if you have an iPad in front of you right now and it has GarageBand on it. Okay, very good. Looks like most of you. So it may be kind of tempting, although I don't see anyone doing it yet, but it may be tempting to kind of noodle or experiment a little bit. We will be giving you time for that after a while. Okay, so we want to set things up and introduce some things and ideas and concepts. And we don't want you to miss any of that, because that'll help you when we do get to the hands-on part. So try to resist that temptation to play or noodle or experiment until we say that it's time to do that. I'm seeing one comment here. Okay, participating passively. Okay, thank you, Mr. Success. I remember meeting you at this session. Okay, thank you. So other ground rules, when we get to the part where we're going to invite you to download, there's 2 different backing tracks. There's a spacious track and a groove track. So we're going to invite you to download them. You can do that at any time. it might start playing automatically on your computer, depending on how your computer is set up. But just so you're aware, or you're there, so that you're aware that once you download it, it might start playing. And then you can just turn it off. But when we get to that point where we want you to actually start playing again on your iPad to the backing track, just try to make sure there's a good balance between what you hear on the backing track and your iPad. We want the iPad to come out a little more prominently, because after you'll be on mute and you'll have time to noodle and experiment and improvise the way that we will be showing you. Or at least in part, that'll be a guideline for you to do some improvisation. But then after that, we'll ask for volunteers to give a demonstration of what you came up with your improvisation, and that will be a springboard for further conversation. So we'll want to be able to hear you clearly. So as long as your backing track is a little bit in the background, we'll be able to hear everything clearly and hear a good representation of your improvisation. So I believe that's it as far as ground rules. Any other thoughts on that? Please chime in, Pete. Otherwise, we go on.
Yeah, that's great. And if you have questions that you're interested in following up, please do put them in the chat, and we'll try and get to them when we can. Can't guarantee to be able to sort of discuss everything, but we'll both pop our email addresses at the end, and if there's something we haven't managed to cover, then hopefully we can follow it up. I just wanted to briefly talk about iPads and why we sort of feel that they're such a valuable addition to a music educator's toolbox. The key thing for me is that an iPad allows you to, in a very portable format, allows you access to thousands of sounds, thousands of compositional options, and really a chance to explore the wonderful world of musical sound. And an app like GarageBand can give a student an experience of success, because some of the technical difficulties, some of the sort of playing of wrong notes, of struggling with tuning, of struggling to hold the strings down, some of that stuff, which is a very important part of learning instruments and acoustic instruments, that's kind of removed. And so for students who actually want to focus on one thing and feel that success in order to move on and build their confidence up, it really allows them to do that. And it's an additional tool. It doesn't necessarily replace all of the other things that we do. It's a wonderful addition to our toolbox, as I said before. And for people with physical disabilities, using an iPad, if it's set up well, and we're going to move on to talk a little bit about how to actually kind of place an iPad, or some ideas about making the iPad more like an instrument. But I've seen it makes some wonderful results, particularly for people who worry about getting things wrong. And that's a big thing. So we'll be talking a little bit later about improvisation and the idea of right and wrong. So we can make success definite for those students at a point at which they need it. And yeah, so we're going to move on, I think, to talk about how to actually set up. And we both have an iPad on a stand, and there's Adams appearing as if by magic. And the reason that I can I'm actually wearing shorts, but you probably can't see them. So this is a K&M stand. It's a fairly well-known make, and it's just a microphone stand that you can adjust. It's got a boom that means we can put it over a wheelchair or over somebody's desk. It works really well. And at the back, there's a kind of an adjustable clamp for the iPad. And what the stand does for me is it turns the iPad into something a little bit more like an instrument. So a person playing it can have the sort of, you can approach it like an instrument, and that's an important point. Adam, you've got a slightly different stand, haven't you, with a really cool grippy bit?
Yeah, and I use K&M also, and Pete and I discussed that we both agree that, you actually wind up spending more money when you buy cheap stuff that winds up breaking, or all of a sudden you're ready to perform somewhere and it doesn't work that day. So, K&M stands are not cheap, but they're very, very reliable and sturdy. It's maybe 8 years ago that I bought my first, and it's still going very strong. Um, and yes, mine too. I flipped this around before, so mine also is adjustable because you may have a mini iPad or an iPad Pro or another size iPad, and this accommodates any size iPad simply by unscrewing something and adjusting the length of each one of these three arms. Okay. And yes, I like to get these with the little grip here, because when I squeeze it, I can go up and down. So the students can make their own adjustments if they get on stage, and if it's a little too high or low, they can adjust accordingly. The old-fashioned kind of it's very hard to work that one knob where you have to unscrew that yet hold on to the other part of the iPad. That can be difficult. And amplification, Pete is going to show you his amplification setup, but mine, well, actually, first I should tell you that when I go, during my regular teaching day, when I'm in the building, I'm going from classroom to classroom. I can't carry a lot of stuff. So generally, I just use the iPad and the little speakers in the iPad, which does work as long as the room is quiet, except for the music. And I have the iPad on a flat surface, a flat, hard surface, like a desk. Most desks are flat and have a hard surface, and that hardness on the surface, serves as a soundboard. So it does kind of amplify the sound a little bit. I might arrange the seating differently. So a bass player and a drummer, for example, are sitting next to each other so that they can hear each other better and lock in. Or other sections of instrumentations I might put together so that it makes sense and they can hear each other better. However, when I can, if there's any portable amplification that I ever use, it's this JBL Flip. And it's, I don't know, it's $70 or $80. So it's certainly not cheap, but much cheaper than most speakers. And it really has a pretty powerful sound for its size. And just as a quick aside, I use this not just for amplifying iPads, but also if I'm playing music, like from my iTunes library. I might just want to introduce the students to the concept of vibration. And so you can imagine, actually, each one of these sides has a little woofer. So you can imagine the feel of this speaker when the students hold on to it. And I encourage that, and I encourage them to, start feeling the music and to know that it has a feeling. And those vibrations are something that pervades our universe, actually. And I might even say that to some of our students who might understand. But it's actually a very important point to just get the students to understand that this is a real connection between us and the music. All right, it's not really just something you hear, it really pervades your body. So that's one of the reasons why I love to use this. And Pete, if you want to show your speaker.
Yeah, because this is important. I think the practicalities and the logistics of moving around classrooms, quite often you may find you have to use the speakers on the actual iPad, which is fine, and that's fine for working on it. But at some point, if you're wanting to share your music or play with other instruments, thinking about the voice of that instrument and the way that voice is presented. I've got quite a fancy. It's going to make the stand fall over. Quite a fancy Mackie speaker, which I will try and show you. Here we go. So that's probably, I'm not sure in dollars. It's probably $130, $150 something like that. But it has 3 different inputs, and you can plug in microphones and all sorts. It's a really good, it's almost like a part of a PA system. And what we find is that a lot of the sounds are great from the iPad itself, but you miss a lot of the lower frequencies. You miss the depth and the really resonant sounds. So plugging it into a speaker is worth having as an option. So we're not saying every single session you do, but as soon as you're playing in performance, what we've found, we run an iPad quartet at Drake. We've got a kind of a group which is based on the idea of a string quartet, and they're creating their own music. Each of them has their own little speaker. So they have a near field monitoring, and that means that they feel they are playing the sound. The sound is coming from where they are. And I think this is an important point with music tech, is that if you just plug it into the kind of the PA system that's somewhere in the room, it detaches. So it's just, we're not expecting everybody to have access to all of these things, and we know that budgets are tight and things, but over a number of years we've built up things. So every time we get a chance, we've kind of bought a good speaker, or we've bought a quality stand, and you'd be surprised, over 3 or 4 years you can gather some decent kit together, and it does make a difference to your band. I'm going to go on as well with iPads. Some of you may know this, and I apologize if you already know it, but it's a crucial thing to using it in an education setting is a thing called guided access. And the way you find guided access is to go into your settings. We are recording this, and I don't know how long the meeting has gone on for. At something like 35 minutes into the call, there'll be the guided access thing, and you can look it up online, but I'm going to just show you what it does. So in the general settings, so I'm in general, there's a thing called accessibility. And under accessibility, if you scroll or push the screen all the way up, guided access on my screen is second from the bottom. And guided access means you can lock that iPad into an app. And you can also draw or kind of gray out certain buttons on that app so that you can focus the student in on the things that you want them to focus on. And you can also prevent them from leaving the app and buying a Ferrari on eBay or something. So I'm sure it's happened. And if you enable guided access, it gives you a chance to put a passcode. So I'm going to do it here and set guided access passcode. And word of advice, don't set a passcode and forget it, which I have done, because you end up locking yourself out of the iPad, which I have done it. And the challenge is making a passcode that you remember, but you can keep secret. And I'm just going to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And you have to put it in twice. I don't recommend this one. That's quite easy to guess. What this means, though, is that when you then go into any app, and I'm going to open up GarageBand, and I've got it on the keyboard instrument at the moment. If I click the home button 3 times, so 1, 2, 3, it asks me guided access starting. And that then means that I can't leave the app unless I put the code in. So I'm going to 1, 2, 3. It's asking me for the code. I know what it is. So I can put 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then it brings you out of guided access. And just very briefly to show you, if I didn't want students to use these buttons, you can, just with your finger, you can draw a square around it. Can you see that? So I've drawn a square, and that's now grayed out. So if I restart guided access, that means those buttons don't work. It's really useful. It doesn't necessarily, and then once you've got a square, you can, the other thing that we sometimes, I work with quite a lot of people who have maybe physical disabilities, cerebral palsy, and that they sometimes, the movement of the hand is quite difficult. The fine motor control is quite difficult. If you draw a grey box all the way over it and there's just the keys left, that's the only thing that will sound. So hopefully that's a useful tip for some of you. If you already know about it, I'm sure you know it's quite a useful thing. But yeah, so it's guided access, and you
Yes,
find it in settings, general accessibility. It's very
great.
useful.
Yeah, great, Pete. I just wanted to chime in first before I say one or two more things about guided access. There were some questions in the chat about
Hmm.
the speaker. I think Robert McCarthy wanted to know what your speaker is called.
Yep, I'll type it in. It's called a Mackie SRM 150.
And does it use battery?
No.
Okay. And Robert, just in case that question was directed at me, right, the Mackie SRM 150. Okay, so mine is the JBL Flip 4. So it's the fourth version. You could maybe even look back for a 3 or a 2, and it'll be a little cheaper. Thank you, Pete. Yes, and this has a lithium rechargeable battery, and so that, adds to its portability.
Roland do an awesome speaker called a Street Cube,
Oh,
which runs off 6 AA batteries and is really quite powerful. And it's like a Buskers amp. But yeah, the Roland Street Cube, I'll stick that in here as well. It's a good option. There's lots of options, and we're not sponsored by K&M either. Other mic stands are available, but they're just good. They're good quality.
yes. Oh, yeah. Someone asked about the clamp. Where did you get the clamp? Do you mean this thing that I'm squeezing to go up and down? Is that what you mean by the clamp? Okay, yes. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
So this is actually, you just have to order the stand with the adjustable or the height adjustable clamp. I don't remember exactly what model it is, but if you look in K&M, you'll find that option available to get the one with the clamp. All right. And so just quickly about guided access, Pete really covered pretty much everything. It's really it's a very powerful tool, and it's gotten me to a place with some students where I just couldn't work with them because they were just all over the place, maybe ordering Ferraris on eBay or whatever. But it got me to the place where I could help that student focus. And then that student became part of our ensemble. Whereas before they kind of had to be, would take the iPad away from them or whatever else. So also importantly, when you get into that area where you can draw and block out certain areas, I also use that area to highlight certain things that I do want the students to play. All right, so Pete was talking about maybe students in chairs with CP or with limited muscle control. For a lot of my students, that may not be the case, but there's still coordination and motor issues, or their cognitive issues. So it's still kind of the same idea about just guiding and supporting the student to be able to do what they can do best. So I might, for instance, gray out the entire screen except for maybe the play button, because maybe this student is just at the point, well, that's pretty much the optimal participation that they can do right now, right? And it's always all about meeting the students where they are. And this is why this is so powerful, because it gives you any option along those lines. I mean, this meaning not just guided access, but iPad music making in general. So, I just may gray out everything on this screen, and then the highlight, the play button may come out clear as day, and the student will know, okay, that's where I'm going to press to start our song, and they feel really proud about, wow, I started the song, So also, every app that you use, as soon as you initiate guided access, and if you do any drawing, the iPad and the app automatically remembers exactly what you drawed out. So anytime you open that app and then go into guided access again, it will come up with the setup that you had already created, which is great. You know, if you're going from classroom to classroom and you know you use this certain app with this certain student and you set up guided access a certain way, it's always there for you. So it's a very powerful feature. They really thought that one out. So, all right. That's all I wanted to add about guided access. Pete, did you want to talk about what we're referring to as seeds? And Pete, if that's where you want to go
Yeah.
to right now, then you can explain it.
Yeah, so what we're going to do in a short while, we're going to ask you to sort of explore GarageBand yourself, and hopefully you've had a chance to look at the clips that we created already to maybe talk you through how to select some of the instruments and chords and things. But one thing that we are aware of is often when we're working with people, the idea of how to make music sound musical, or how to help people with the idea of a blank page. And improvisation is terrifying for some people, and doesn't need to be. And so what we were talking about is the idea of improvisational seeds, which are things you can, simple starting points or simple things that you can share with students or learners, and it just helps them to begin with something. And then if they begin with confidence, they then take it. And what we were talking about, I suppose seeds is good because it can grow under their nurture. All we've done is provided something small, and they have been able to kind of add to it and all kinds of things, and who knows what it's going to grow into. And one of the ideas, I think Adam has different ways of doing this as well. There isn't a right or a wrong way, but one idea I have is of using simple cards with words on them or little instructions. So very high tech again. This special thing I've made has a zoom function. And as you can see, something like tap your fingers lightly could be an idea for giving your music some quality of something, and then play short sounds or make the music zigzag. I don't really know what that means, but it could be something, if it means something, there isn't a right or a wrong answer. So the idea of this, and maybe I would make these into little cards that you could pick. So you'd go up to the student, you'd say, hey, pick a card, any card, and then they would pick it. They may have picked the card that says play really long notes. And that will give their input and their playing a certain character, so they can pick it out amongst the others. That's just the first idea. And what I'll do, I will post these into the chat as a little JPEG. The other idea is to perhaps use graphic scores or shapes. And again, with an iPad, this can work really well because you can literally trace a shape with your finger. And sometimes you get something that you're really, really pleased with. So I've got some ideas here. So there's shapes with some breaks in them, because we know silence is important. And on reflection, those breaks should be a bit longer. Then these would be like, to my mind, they're kind of long held notes. And then again, it's sort of like a swirl. And if you do that with your finger on the iPad, you get something. So the idea of just drawing shapes, you could start them off. You could also give them a blank one and say, you draw your own. So it's this idea of not just saying, hey, make something up, go. Because that's almost too much. That's too much scary. But if you start them off with something, but don't give them everything, they have to fill in the gaps. And I think, Adam, you've got a way of doing a similar thing, but there's a different approach.
Yeah, and it's wonderful that we really, the way we approach it may be different, but the result is the same. So I like to try to keep the students' focus on the oral participation of the music, of the response, the creation and response to sound, the learning to listen and open your ears. I loved what you said, Pete, about the silence. I talk about silence with my students all the time. because that's respecting the silence is so important. But I'll show my students the same thing, although my screen is a little different now. It doesn't really matter. If you can imagine a keyboard, I'll show the student a pattern, right? Or with some apps you can go up and down like this to kind of create a scale or different modes and stuff. Which, if you remember in the video, Pete showed you how to create some different modes, or select different scales. So I may show a student, well, okay, let's do this, or let's just focus on the higher area and go up and down, or make a little circle going around, or tap. So I'll show them so that while they're seeing what I'm doing, they hear the results. So again, hopefully it gives a closer connection to the actual oral activity of making music. And again, that's just me. I think Pete's idea is great, and it's going to be more helpful for certain students, right? And what I may do, because I'm very orally oriented as well, when I'm hearing the students play, I may be able to say, okay, tap more now, because I may hear too many of the long kind of up and down things, or vice versa. So, and then the student knows what I'm referring to, because I've just showed them. So that's, it opens so many doors just by allowing the students to open their ears. Anything else about that, Pete, or you want to go on to talking about your spacious track? We're going to actually, there was one thing about the chat. Good. All right. Thank you. Oh, no, that's the seeds. Pete put in the seeds, those two JPEGs of the seeds. Oriana, if you don't mind, can you share in the chat the two tracks, the spacious track and the groove track? Just put them right in there, and that's we're finally getting now to the place we're going to introduce. We know like the different motions we can make, and now we're going to talk about each track, and then we're going to really get you guys going with the hands-on. And thanks for your patience with all that. So Pete, go ahead if you want to talk about your spacious track.
Yeah, so we when we discussed sort of doing this workshop, we thought it's very difficult to know what different people may need, but one idea was to have two pieces of music that have very different feels and would be appropriate in different situations, but are based on the same notes. So both of these pieces of music will work with the white notes of a scale. So if you've got an A minory feel, or you've got a C majory feel, or white note pentatonic, all of that stuff those notes will agree with the harmony and the things in the background. And the idea as well is to make sure that there's a broad range of possibilities, because I often work with people who repeating an action or targeting very exact actions is a really tricky thing to do. So the idea of having spacious music is really where there is no time, no kind of strong pulse or sense of like, if you can't play this on the beat, then it's wrong. And again, this is where those seeds ideas might be quite important, because it's very easy for music like that to become directionless and a bit sort of broad and vague and that kind of thing. But I've kind of I use GarageBand to put it together. I use some of the string sounds. So if you're wanting to find the string sounds, you click on the little square with the two squares, and you scroll across, and there's the strings. Anybody that teaches any kind of composition work, the strings are fantastic. You can kind of learn all sorts of, you can hear that. And what I did on the strings is I set the scale, which you do just here where there's some notes. And I just set it to major, which means there are no notes that make you kind of go, oh, that's a bit wrong, or I'm not happy with that sound. Also, in the videos, we talked about the wrench, which we call a spanner in the UK. The wrench button, which this is such an important part. And what this does, it allows you to change the chords and the scales of the iPad, and you can set your song to only use 3 chords. And that's in the, actually, I've not got it set to chords. Sorry, it's, if I change this to chords, then I press the wrench, then edit chords. This is where you get your chance to choose your chords. And I think we mentioned earlier about the fact that you can reduce the number of options. You can reduce maybe the chances of having too much information. If you only have 3 chords or 4 chords, it's much easier for somebody to play along. So with this song, I've got it set to C, A minor 7, and F major 7. Those 3 chords also fit in with the groove track. And the idea is that, I'll go back to notes. If I played the spacious backing track and just explore those sounds, all of them will fit. And you can change your instrument at any time you want by moving. So in the strings, you've got a little spotlight, and you can move them across bass, cello, viola, and violins. So that's really great. And then again, I used the synthesizers, and there's so many different instruments on this. Synthesizer looks like the keyboard, and again, you can choose the instruments you want. There's a whole load of different instruments, and if I choose chords, it remembers the chords. So this song, any instrument you choose will have those same 3 chords. And if you've worked with somebody called Bob, you could call it Bob's song. Every time you work with Bob, you open up Bob's song, and those 3 chords will be there. It's a great time saver. Suddenly sounds like something from the 80s. So that's kind of one of the ideas. And the idea for Spacious is to, what I'd like you to try, if you want to do Spacious, I think we're going to give you a choice which one you want to do. But to maybe use some of these, try tracing some of these shapes with it, try using some of these ideas, mixing them up a bit, and deciding on a bit of an order and a structure. So I think that's all I wanted to say, really. The only other thing to remember, of course, is that this music means something to me, and it probably means something to everybody, and that might be something different. When we had a chat yesterday, and Adam was wearing a NASA t-shirt, or well, it's not quite a NASA t-shirt, but it had the NASA logo on it, and it made me think that actually this for me is kind of thinking about the universe and space, and maybe it would look great with a video of like Apollo kind of going through space with the stars in the background and the planets. And so I think the idea of having that imagination to think about what the music makes you think, what does it make you think about, is also really, really important at this point. So yeah, that's it really. Just choosing lovely sounds and playing around with them. It's so easy on the iPad. Adam.
Oh, thanks, Pete. You're really good, man, because I promised you I was going to wear the NASA shirt again, but, you know, I threw you a curveball on that one, but you still were able to still make that connection between space and spacious, and, you know, kind of that visualization of being out in space floating, which is frankly actually something that one of the images that I love to have are just, you know, well, it's kind of a personal aside, but, you know, because of my interest in science, especially astrophysics and space, and just seeing these incredible pictures of the universe, it's an orchid. Every tiny little picture is a symphony. And then so you can imagine the whole universe, what kind of incredible symphony that is. And also quickly, before I start talking a little bit about my groove track, Oriana, thank you so much. You put MP3 or M4A links to both the Spacious track and the Groove track. So that's the easiest way for everybody to access them. You can also, there's a Google Drive link as well, so you can click on that link and then it'll download from Google Drive. But the easiest way is to just access them right in the chat. And Oriana and I were trying to kind of experiment with how to get those into the chat. So just because the Groove track appears there so many more times, please consider using either the Spacious track or the Groove track equally. You can even experiment with both, and then maybe you'll have something to share with either one. Yes, my track, I'll just play it kind of briefly here. Okay. Okay, so that gives you the idea, and basically we just loop that through. Some little chord pad comes in later on, also using those same C, A minor, and F chords. And we picked those chords actually because you can use the same. Some students can just hold that C chord, and then, you know, depending on the bass line, it changes it. So it's a C. When it's a C in the bass, it's an A minor seventh. Right? Remember, if you're holding C, E, G in root position, I should say, and then when you play the A, then it's an A minor seventh. If you play the F, well, it's really an F9 or an F major seventh with an added 9, or it's just a C. I'm sorry, an F over C. So, but just to show you that. Just with that one voicing, there's a lot of colors you can make. So you don't really have to try to overthink things. Again, you can find ways to meet students where they are. One student might be able to move and play the bass line and play that rhythmic pattern that was just played in the Groove track. And the Groove track was designed with parts that are simple enough so that, yes, we invite you, you know, this is yours. We're just sharing all of this with you. So we invite you either with the Spacious track or the Groove track to encourage your students to try to recreate that or to create their own that's kind of like that, but different. And for you guys, in order to kind of get your feet wet in this and to develop confidence, when you play along, feel free to, maybe you'll just pick, like I have the bass part here. So instead of, okay, that's exactly what appears in the track that I pre-recorded. So you can just play along like that, or you could just change it a little bit. Sorry. Right? Okay, or you can get, you know, quite wild with it if you want. There's plenty of space. It's also kind of a spacious track in the way that even though it's a groove track, there's still a lot of space for a lot of stuff. Same thing with drums. And of course, if you remember in the video, we showed you briefly how to get to different instruments. So this is just one way to do it. And of course, if you have questions along those lines, I'm not seeing anything in the chat right now, but please feel free to ask questions. So I'm going to double tap on that. And now we have, okay, or you can add, we don't have a ride symbol, so you can, sorry, there's a little delay. That's why sometimes when I tap it, it doesn't, but after the first tap, it works. Okay, Or, of course, everything that Pete showed you already with choosing different scales and choosing different sounds or creating little chord voicings for yourself, all of that is good too for your improvisation. Also, because this is a groove track and there is the tempo is very specific, again, in the wrench, if you choose the groove track, even though you think, well, I already have the tempo, I don't have to worry about setting a tempo, there are certain effects and there's even like sequences and a whole bunch of other things within this program. We're just kind of showing you the basics for this session of the program, but it's a very, very deep program. For free, it's just, there's nothing like it. So
Adam, can I just jump in with, if you've set the tempo as well? Some people I work with, again, they find repeated tapping difficult, but there is a way with the drums. If you use
yes,
two fingers on a drum, you can get it to repeat a beat.
yes.
So I know it's great to develop that skill if that skill is open to you, but actually for some people who find the tapping difficult, they could still play the bass drum kind of. I don't know if you
Right.
can.
So
that.
with two fingers, right, we could get like a 4 on the floor kind of thing, just by holding it with two fingers. Same thing. So now you get eighth notes on the snare. I don't know if that, maybe it doesn't work on the hi-hat.
It depends how wide you're. So if you're further apart, it's slower, and if they're closer together, I think it's faster.
Oh, good.
Yeah, I found it out by accident completely just one day, and
okay. So if you can see what I'm doing there, that's right, Pete. So, right, as I spread out my fingers more, whoops. All right. All right. It increases the speed at which the note is being played. So that's a great one. Also, okay, so that kind of covers the whole point about the tempo, Pete. Thank you. Also remembering that there's lots of other stuff in there that can be synced with whatever the tempo is. So just remembering that we set for this song, for the groove track, the tempo is actually 96. So you can tap in here and change your tempo to make sure that it's 96. And then you have a whole lot of tools and resources at your disposal. So very good. I'm looking here. So yeah, Pete, we're gonna let everyone go and have some fun now.
yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So just remembering what I said before, please, we're going to give you about 10 minutes, okay? And if you decide you want to share with us, we really appreciate if you do, and we encourage that. Think about that. We'll give you, like about a half a minute to just demonstrate what you've done and what you've come up with. And then we'll discuss that from an educational point of view. Maybe you'll have ideas about why you created what you did and how that might work with your students or other educators, because we're all kind of coming from different environments and experiences. So other educators can chime in and say, well, I like this because I could use this in this way with my students, or so on and so forth, all right? So in a sense, this is really the meat of what we're doing here. We have over a half hour left. We'll give you the 10 minutes to just have some fun. Pick either the Spacious or the groove track. If you're adventurous, you can try both, but do one at a time. And then we'll get back to you guys in about 10 minutes and encourage some little bit of demonstrating on your part and discussion from there.
So that's 5 to 6 now, isn't it? Well, no, it's 5 to 6 here. It must be 5 to 1 for you.
5 to 1, yes.
So I guess around 1:05, we will start talking again and inviting you to share what you found. In the meantime, if there is an issue or a problem, do write in the chat, and we'll see if we can help with it. And should also just say these tracks are kind of yours to take away and do what you want with them. If you want to try them in your classes and keep them, please do. We just wanted to give you something to start us off. So I think that's a go on improv time.
Have fun. Actually, I neglected to say one thing. If you could just hold up for just a second, sorry to interrupt. But if you don't mind, if you're working on this, if you could keep muted, but if you can turn your camera on, because it'll help us to be able to kind of see how you're working. Even if I can't see your iPad screen, I can still kind of see a lot about the way you're working and so on. And it might kind of help us lead to further conversation as well. So if possible, if you don't mind, you could turn on your camera while you're doing your work on your improvisation. Thanks so much. I'd love to see you all working. Keep going. We have about 4 minutes left. Remember, there's no such thing as wrong. It's just kind of what you come up with, what you feel, what you're playing. I would tell my students the same thing. Just enjoy, experiment, be creative, expressive in your own way. That's why there can't be anything wrong. It's right for you. If it's right for you, it's right. Okay, so about 1 minute left. And we would really love, as many of you want to volunteer as possible. That would really be a highlight for our session. Really, the highlight is always you guys. In this case, you guys are kind of the students, but we know that you guys work with students, and it's always our students that are the highlight. That's really kind of the central goal in the end for this or any other music making presentation. It's for our students. Okie dokie. So we actually let this run about a minute longer. So we're gonna just ask you all, even though I'm sure you're all kind of into it, if you could stop the improvisation now. And again, no big deal. We're certainly not expecting anything formally prepared in any way, but just the improvisations that you created, if you could give us an idea of that. So we'll ask if you want to raise your hand, please, and then we'll unmute you. And also just a reminder that you're going to be playing your own backing track. We're not going to play a backing track for you because, with the internet and across huge distances, in some cases, it won't work. So you play your own backing track a little quietly, and then show us your improvisation on your iPad. So please do volunteer for us.
I'm going. Hi.
Oh,
Hey,
yes.
well done, Emily.
Thanks,
Hi.
Emily. Yes, someone else was talking. That's why.
Okay, I
Emily,
can't hear them.
it's okay. No, you're on. If you wanted to volunteer, and thank you, Emily. Hello. It's been a while. It's good to see you.
Hi. Good to see you too. So I was playing around with the groove track and one of the synth pads, the sliding tones, in a major pentatonic scale. So
Emily, so good for you. I have a question for you, since now you are, and I know you well enough to know that you're pretty well versed at a lot of this stuff. What's a groove track? Oh, okay. I'm sorry. You're using our groove track. I'm sorry. I was thinking of something else. That was so silly of me. All right. So go ahead, Emily. Please go ahead.
Let me see if I can get this going here. Oh, that's weird. It's not playing now. Oh. I am having technical difficulties. I don't know why the groove track's not going now for me. But anyways, I was playing with the sliding pad here, so. With that groove track in the major pentatonic. I don't know why it's not playing for me now.
Cool.
I had it here, but.
That's okay. It was playing before when you were experimenting, right?
Yeah. Oh, there it is.
Oh,
Yeah,
there we go.
Emily, have you got the option to turn on original sound? Because if you do, that will stop it ducking out.
Turn original sound in the audio settings.
It's on the Zoom setting, and there's in mine it's the top left hand side. It says turn on original sound. If you click that, it's better for music.
Interesting.
Zoom thinks of speech, but it thinks that any kind of continuous sound is noise, so it cuts it out.
Where do you find that in Zoom?
Are you on a laptop?
I am.
It is an option for me on the top of my screen. I've got to turn on original sound. Don't worry if it's not there, but it's just something to bear in mind for.
I'll take a look for that. I'll let somebody else go in the meantime.
That was fantastic. We got most of it, but then it ducked out a wee bit because it thought it was noise, which is what Zoom does to music.
Yeah. Thank you for that, Pete. And yeah, it sounded great. If we can get back to you, Emily, we will. But we still, from what we heard, I still have a lot of some questions to ask you and so on. It was a wonderful contribution. Thank you. We'd love to hear from someone else. Any other volunteers? Okay, it looks like Robert.
Hello.
Hi, Robert.
Hi. So you can put the track right into the app too. So I was just kind of looping it on there.
Good.
And then I tried to add like a guitar track underneath it. But it was a little tricky because I wasn't sure what the tempo was and I kept trying to match it and it wasn't working out. So, but that's okay. So I used kind of a similar machine as Emily, just a different synth sound. And I'm just using major scale in C. So. That's
beautiful.
About it.
Yeah, thank you. We're going to discuss that a little bit. That was really awesome, Robert. Someone put in the chat that it's in order to get the sound the way Pete was talking about. It looks like someone said that it's on the microphone. There's a little up arrow on the microphone. I'm not sure if I see it there though. Whoever typed that in the chat, can you speak a little bit about that?
So on my computer, above where you unmute, there's a little check to the right, and it has audio settings, and then you go to that, and it gives you the option to turn on original sound at the very bottom.
Yeah, that's it. You tick the box to show in meeting option, turn on original sound.
I found that in the audio settings, I had to check something to show that option.
Yeah.
And then there's 3 sub options also: high fidelity music mode, echo cancellation, and stereo audio.
I would just go stereo audio. The high fidelity creates very strange things, like sort of grumbles and booms and stuff. Not sure why.
Okay.
There you go, a little bit of Zoom info as well.
Yeah, hey, especially these days, we know we need it. Thank you for that contribution, Amber. So we're going to try, if you can, use those settings the way we just discussed.
There was a question, Adam, as well, about how did you get the track into, so Robert, you said you just put it in. Could you describe how you did that? Because I think that might be useful for people.
Yes, so let's see, I downloaded it onto the iPad from my email, or you could do it from the Zoom, I suppose. And then I went to, so there's a loop button at the top corner.
I'm showing you, that's right. Oh, good, you're doing it great.
That
You go
button
ahead.
there. Yeah, so there's this button here, which does loops. And then you have access to the Apple Loop library that comes with GarageBand. But next to Apple Loops, it says Files. So you can click on Files, and then you have the option to search for files, and you have to or I have this one, browse items from the Files app. And then I just went to the downloaded files folder, and then I found it from there. And then once you have it there, so I have Groove Track here, then you can pull it or delete it, or you can grab it and then drag it onto the what is this called? The interface, but you can grab it directly from that menu.
Yes, so that's right. What Robert is saying, that's perfect, Robert. You just need to get into this part, what we call the arrange page, I think, Robert, is what generally it's referred to. Because
Okay,
you can
yeah.
create your whole arrangement on this page, and this is where you can see all the MIDI or audio being recorded right in the arrange page. So you get to that by clicking on, there's 3 little lines with different length dots. So that's kind of like the icon for the arrange page. So you click on that. And then once you're in there, then you go to the loops and do everything that Robert just said. And then the arrange page is right there for you to drag it into.
If you are new to GarageBand as well, there's a very helpful, there's the little question mark in the top right often gives you little tips. If you press it, it gives you little yellow kind of tips about things you can use, which can be really helpful when you're still learning. You can find out things that you wouldn't necessarily know. So just that's a good point.
So Emily and Robert, I don't know if you want to try to do yours one more time, Emily, now that we found where that audio setting is. Yeah, and you too. Well, we'll see if we have time for you both to do it, and then maybe we have some more volunteers. We should have time. Yeah.
All right, see if this works better. It's weird. I keep having to refresh the Groove Track to get it to work. Here we go. So I was really just working with a 1 octave span, but I wasn't sure how to get it down to 1 octave. Because my students, I would probably start with just that 1 octave. So I was wondering how to shrink it even further. I've done it before, but I couldn't see it there.
So to my knowledge, Pete, chime in maybe if, in order to shrink it, yeah, I have to go in here and find it. While I'm looking for it, Pete, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I remember I used to be able to make it so I could just have a few notes, or how'd you do that?
Yeah, let me see if I can go back in here and create a track and find it. Okay.
Pete, you're muted, so we can't hear you.
Oh, you're muted.
I was chatting away. It's a picture of a little keyboard there.
Yeah, I have that. The smallest
that-
it'll give me is the 2 octave.
Ah, okay.
I don't know.
Maybe that is the smallest it'll do.
Okay.
I've got kind of 1.5 on that one.
Yeah, I'm getting 1.5.
For a major scale. Yeah, I was in the pentatonic, so I guess.
Yeah, because you've only got, yes. So it does a kind of 1.5 octaves of 8-note scales, but
Okay.
that is a useful thing because you can have double keyboard as well like that. It's quite fun.
Yes, yes. Emily, you're right. There used to, I recall also there used to be a way to just keep it within 1 octave.
Yeah, I remember we
So-
did it once before,
Yeah.
and you could choose
Yeah.
even just having like 3 notes or 5 notes, because that's really helpful for my level is that I'm working with. I'm working with.
Yeah. Major pentatonic. So yeah, I see mine is going up 2 octaves. Well, even though we're both recalling this, so it probably was actually a thing. But remember that we can use guided access to eliminate one of those
That's true.
octaves.
Yeah.
That might help. I know if you want also the keys to be a little wider, which they will
Exactly.
be with 2 octaves.
It was, yeah.
There's also a way to zoom in. It's maybe a little deeper, but all the accessibility features, they all have some use. We focused on guided access, which is a really big one, but there's all kinds of accessibility features, and one of them is zoom. And if you got into that, well, then you can zoom in on just that 1 octave, and it does make everything bigger.
That would be cool. It'd be easier to distinguish between the individual notes.
Yes, yes. So, and with good technology, there's always more than one way to do the same thing. So this is, again, deeper conversations, but if you want only 1 octave and you can't actually do it on the interface, well, you can use the zoom function, you can use guided access and so on. So Emily and Robert, my question is, Emily, you referred to the level of your students. I noticed that you were both of you were doing a lot of sliding, and the sound, I mean, I know what it is, but can you describe what you chose to make the sound kind of slide? There's another word for it, but how did you do that? Because it doesn't always do that.
I didn't turn on a glissando feature, but it came like that in the synth pad. That was the feature of that particular instrument. But there is a glissando.
Yeah.
Saw somewhere. Where'd that go?
Right.
I've got the Epic Cloud Formation synth, and there's a button in the middle that says glissando.
Yes.
So you can choose it in there.
Okay.
That's it. Exactly. So for most of the synths, it's right in the center. There's glissando, or if you tap it again, there's scroll. So scroll allows you to change octave just by sliding. Okay.
Oops.
Well, if you can see what I'm doing there, right? I'm just scrolling from 1 octave to another. Okay. Or pitch. I think it was pitch that you were using, guys, actually. if I'm not mistaken. I might be wrong, but my
Correct.
experience has been in order to get that sliding of pitch, you need to select pitch over here.
Yeah, one is just like sliding on like a violin, and the other just goes from note to note to note, like on a
Exactly.
piano. So
Exactly. Exactly. And the pitch is the one that really slides over all the chromatic range and even the in-between chromatics. But glissando is kind of like more like it's like a fretboard on a guitar or sliding your fingers over the keys of the keyboard. Okay.
It's worth remembering as well for anybody that hasn't worked it out. There's huge numbers of instruments in each of the instrument families. So for the synths, there's if right in the middle of mine there's usually a button that tells you which one you're on, and if you press it, it kind of brings up this menu of a. I mean, there's about 100, I think, different synths. So the first one that comes up isn't the only one that's available. There's always a lot more instruments, and the same with guitar, same with the bass. There's all these different sounds you can try, and it's really, really useful to say to people, what sort of sound do you like? And again, this is what's wonderful, because if you had to sort of sound check 12 different basses in a room, imagine trying to set up and tune 12 basses and move the amps and all that stuff. But you can really develop the ear. It's about listening and developing your musical taste and your sounds that you love, and each individual can do that. And what Robert did, dragging the track in, remember, if you then play, you can record, and then you've got evidence of what that person did. So that's their own version of the song. So for you, gathering evidence and being able to take it home as an MP3, they can, they could text it to their mum, can listen to this song. It's really, really useful.
Can you record it, recording the screen as well, so you get the visual of them playing?
I think you could, but you'd probably need to have a different piece of software. I don't know whether you can record screen.
So for most of the newer iPads, it used to be that you had to slide up from the very bottom, but the more recent iOS,
Sorry.
you put your finger above the interface in the upper right-hand corner and slide down. And you might have this record button there. If not, there's a way to get it. Or if I'm seeing Emily is trying to slide down. So it's unfortunate that, well, it's really a good thing actually that these iOS updates keep coming. It's a little hard because it changes things a little bit, but at the same time, it always gives you more features and more stuff you can do. So in this case, Emily, try sliding up from the bottom center. Did you try that? Okay, there it is. So you might have the little, if I don't know if you can see it on my screen, this little outer circle with the filled in circle in the center. That's the symbol, kind of a universal symbol for record. So if you don't have it, you can go into your settings, and I believe this is called the control panel. So in your main settings, you can look for control panel, and then you'll see that there's a whole bunch of things that you can choose to put here in this control panel. and record will be one of them. So you can press record, and then everything you do on your screen will be recorded until you disengage the recording. And yes, that's a great thing to have, Emily, a great tool for, especially nowadays when we're teaching more online, or even if not, giving the student a recording and showing them this is what we have to do, kind of like we did with our initial track, but you can do that, yes, right on the iPad now. Okay.
Share with parents too is really nice.
Yeah, absolutely. Bingo. Yes. So that was it. Pete, I don't know, we have a little more time. Do we want to open up the floor for any further questions, or do you want to maybe have one more person demonstrate?
Be great to hear somebody else's, if anybody wants to share what they were trying, and it's just really useful, and
Do
it's
we have
great for us
any?
to hear it.
We'd love that. We'd love to hear if anyone else can volunteer. Okay, Gretchen, thank you. Oh, you can unmute. There you go.
Okay, so I was playing around with the spacious one and just an acoustic guitar.
Mhm.
And then I tried a little bit of the circling.
Ah, nice. Beautiful. Yeah. I know, Pete, that's exactly, I think, that the type of approach that you had in mind. I shouldn't speak for you, but I'm getting the sense that that's right on.
Yeah, I think so. The idea of not having the pressure of bar lines
Mm.
is nice, but having circles are amazing things somehow, and the fact you can circle once you've got that, you can try and do it more slowly. You can try and speed it up. So we're always looking for, once somebody's got something that they feel is successful, you can start to push them. But until you've got that feeling of I can do this, you can't. I think that's the thing. It's about saying, "Oh, that's so beautiful. Why? I wonder if can you do it more slowly and really slow." That's always the biggest challenge for me. Is I think such slow movement. If you did a really slow circle, you just pluck a string every now and again as you kind of went past it. Yeah, that's really beautiful. It's nice with plucked strings.
So, and just imagine now, we may be working with students who have heard lots of music. We find that, actually, you know what? I have something to say, but I think it's more important to open the floor. We have maybe a few minutes left. So does anyone else have any comments? Or any questions?
Just
Are
thank
there?
you. This was great. It's I can't believe it's taken me this long to play with this. So you opened the door. Thank you.
I've really enjoyed playing kind of proper guitar and because I'm not very good at it, but a GarageBand allows you to try all these instruments, which I love about it.
Yeah.
Shirley, I think.
Shirley?
Hi, I think that was so important to have these two things contrasting, to get rid of the bar lines and the beat and the rhythm, because there are so many students where that is too much of a challenge, but you can still use all these other parameters. And that's what I think people forget, that it's still music, but it's not with this sort of being forced into this corset that some people can't manage.
Yeah. I totally agree. I've started calling it timeless music, which to me is very positive, but also kind of says what it is.
Does anyone have any thoughts about how you might go back into your learning environment and implement any of this?
I'm interested. Oh, go ahead.
Sorry.
Yes.
No, go for it.
Nisreen.
I actually, sorry, Nisreen, yes, hi, thank you. It's a great session. So I was trying short, long notes and was having fun. And then my son came in, so it was applied right away. He's in grade 7 now, and he already started. This is cool. I like it. So it's just the freedom for students. He just started right away, and I was just showing him a pattern, and he did something completely different. So it's a great start. I would love to start and give the options for the students, but just to give you as a quick application. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Wonderful. Yeah. It's a pleasure working with you all.
Thanks.
Now,
I think
Thank
we have
you,
a
and-
hand up actually in the chat if we have a second.
yeah. Well, you were just saying how you might use it. Now, I don't actually have an iPad, so I'd had to find an equivalent. But I've got a number of students who are on the spectrum, and some of them are toward the classic end of the spectrum with a very low vocabulary. And so, where I'm interested in, for me, my cutoff has always been where you have, you know, your expressive language versus your receptive language. If the student, even if the student didn't have a lot of expressive language, as long as they had receptive language, I could do with what I did. You know, with being able to get them to play and read music and other things like that. But if they're not, sweetie, please don't do that. If they're not, if they have very low receptive language, so that they're not able to follow directions, it occurs to me that this might be a really good way to get that sort of student involved, and it would give an extra dimension. So that's how I was. So even though I didn't have an iPad, that's why I was really interested in joining today, because I thought this would be a cool way of opening up to yet a broader audience. So
Yes, very, very good. Thank you. And I love your comment about expressive and receptive language. That's very important. And music, yes, in many ways opens up doors to that in very powerful ways, actually. So, and I've just been looking through the chat. Thank you. You've all been so complimentary, and I'm very, very happy to see that many of you have been inspired to bring some of this back to the classroom, and you found it useful, which that was our goal for sure, one of them. So we're grateful. We're grateful to be able to share. I'm sorry, I've been talking more than I should, probably, Pete or anyone else.
No, I just want to say that I'm really pleased. What I was hoping is that you would get something that maybe you can use in the future and uncover some of the mysteries. The thing for me with GarageBand is it's such a deep program, and it's free for iPads. Just to say though, also I know other tablets are available, but iPads are the best tablets available for music because of a latency issue with some other issues, and also the fact Adam was talking about this as well, that most of the software, so if you have GarageBand, nearly all iPads will behave in a very similar way. The difficulty with a lot of other tablets is they're all kind of subtly different or not so different, and you could have a group of 6 devices that are all behaving in completely different ways, which obviously for the type of students we often work with, that can be just an added difficulty. So that's why sort of the iPad, and the iPads are, you know, are very stable as well. That's why we've picked this. And a shout out for ThumbJam as an app, which isn't free, but it's not expensive, and it adds a new dimension to the sounds that you can access as well. So
Yes.
Somebody said about having 30 iPads and a band, wanting to start a band. Yeah. So I would suggest you have a ThumbJam section as well, because that would open up an amazing world.
Ah, yes, I'm seeing that now. Beautiful. All right, yeah, that's Alexis. Yeah, wow. Well, and also Oriana, I know. Well, actually, I think we discussed it. If we would love to be in touch with all of you, or at least offer. I see that Pete already put his email in the chat. I'll put mine too. But Oriana, if you don't mind sending another email to everyone with our contact information, because whether it's Alexis and her 30 brand new iPads or anyone else, even if you do have an Android device or anything at all, any questions at all, we'd be happy to provide any support that we can. And Pete and I have discussed this, so I know that, you know, I'm speaking for both of us on this.
Yep, absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, everybody, for your time on Saturday, and it was great. And so thank you also for some of you jumping in and sharing with us. We were slightly worried. What would we do if nobody wanted to?
It was a very good showing and great participation. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. I hope that we see you all in June for our next session. This was absolutely amazing, and I'm so happy that I got to see it. Awesome. Really great.
Thanks for all
you.
your
So
support,
much,
Ariana.
guys.
Bye-bye.